everybody, I'm Lou the Rocker Witch, and today I am going to be talking about income inequality in the tarot community as well as consumerism. So I'm wading into this topic. I don't know if it's smart of me to wade into these waters, but I'm going to wade in anyway. So welcome if you're new here, and if you are a returning visitor, welcome back. Love to have you here. So I was inspired I'm a little late to the game, I have to admit. So apparently this discussion has been going on for a few weeks, and I am just new to the game. I saw Benebell Wen's blog post, which I will link below, which I thought was really great. And then I saw Mixtress Rae's video. Shout out to Mixtress Rae. And I saw her video about it, and I saw a few other videos as well. So I thought there were a lot of really interesting opinions, and I thought there was good, different perspectives on this type of subject. And this is a subject that comes around every so often in the tarot community, and I think it's an important one to talk about. I think it's good. It's one of those things that we don't often we don't talk about it all the time, but there's a reason that it comes back around every so often. And I think particularly right now, because we are living right now, as I'm recording this, in a time where we have really high inflation. We're still in COVID. COVID is still a thing, but we're out of the lockdowns and stuff like that. But those 2020, 2021, 2022 were really hard years, and a lot of people were hit hard economically, and now we have inflation that's only making the divide between the rich and the poor bigger and bigger. So I think it's something that it's showing up not just in our community, it's showing up in a lot of communities. I think a lot of people are being affected by this. And so I think it's important to, talk about these things. So the first thing I think that I wanted to talk about was just how income inequality is a thing. And, I think in the past, at least in the last decade or so, we've been pretty, we're getting better, we'll say. It was not perfect, but we're getting better about talking about some of the other inequalities, things like sexism, racism, homophobia, things like that, right? But we're not very good, particularly in North America, about talking about class inequality and economic inequality. And it's real, and it is a big thing because it affects all areas of your life, and it cuts across all of these different divides, right? If you have, more money, then you are, you're able to make more choices. You have more power. You're able to, just live a higher quality life than somebody who does not have as much money. And so I think we don't often talk about that particular inequality, and yet it is such a big one and affects all of us in all communities so much. So, everybody, when we look at TarotTube, there are people of all sorts of incomes all across the board, right? And, if you are somebody that is on the lower end, if you are not earning as much, you do not have as many resources, it can be a bit of a struggle because you can't afford the latest decks. You can't afford, the most high-tech equipment to record things on. And so you might feel somewhat limited in what you can do. You can't afford, maybe high-tech software. Maybe you're working 2 or 3 jobs and you do not have the time to shoot lots of videos or to learn a whole bunch of new software and things like that. So it really can affect a lot of different areas, when I think specifically of how it might affect people in the tarot tube or spiritual witchy tube sphere. So it can, already, if you are thinking of it in that way, you can see where those inequalities kind of start to come up. And, the person that has more spending money, they're going to be able to acquire more decks. And let's face it, as much as people say, oh, I don't like consumerism, it is the unboxing videos that tend to get the most views. It just is, right? Because people want to see the deck and they want to see, is this something that I want to buy? I love watching tarot unboxings because I can't afford a lot of decks, but sometimes I just like to see what's out there and just like to see, what other people have and kind of what the art trends are and things like that. And I know that when I put on a tarot unboxing on my channel, it tends to do a little better than some of the other videos that I do. But I don't want my channel, and that's a personal choice, to just be unboxing videos. And also, quite frankly, I can't afford that. I just don't have the money. And then you kind of get into this inequality thing where somebody who maybe can't afford to buy a lot of decks and so is getting more views because they're doing more unboxing videos, they then often get sent decks for free to review. And that can seem like really unfair when you're somebody who, doesn't earn a lot of money in the first place. Um, I, you know, any publishers, independent people, if you were looking for someone to review your decks, I'm not going to be shy. I would love to review decks. I mean, I would never review anything I wasn't totally interested in. I would, if I had the choice of reviewing decks, I would review decks I was actually interested in. But I don't begrudge people who have that opportunity because that would be awesome. I have been sent, I think, 3 decks in the whole time I've been on TerraTube to review, and I'm really grateful for them. Thank you. But every other deck that I have, and I have an extensive collection, was bought with my own money. It was not sent to me. And I think, when I am sent a deck, and like I said, it's only been 3 times, I'm very clear that, this was sent to me. So I do not own a lot of indie decks because a lot of people are talking about how expensive indie decks are and how, you have to be of a certain income to be able to afford them. I only have 5 indie decks. 5, that's it. Like, I could not take part in only 10 indie decks because I don't have 10 indie decks. When I have a little bit of money for tarot decks, I can afford the mass market deck. I can't afford, the $100 deck. I have bought, like I said, I have 5 indie decks, and I might do a video of which 5 indie decks I have. But the other thing is, I've been collecting tarot over years and years and years, like decades now. And so I have an extensive collection, but it's not like I'm buying decks all the time. This is, like I said, it's over years that I've accumulated them. And I'll go through times where I have more spending money and I buy more. And or times where I don't buy decks. And it's not always necessarily about money. Sometimes there's just not a lot of decks I'm interested in. At this time, because like I said, there's, inflation is a thing and it's affecting people because everything has gone up. Like rents have gone up. Like housing costs are crazy. And, I know it's different in different parts of the world, but housing's gone up. Groceries, like my grocery bill has increased in the last year by 50%. Like it's nuts. And people have dubbed it greedflation because it's not like there's a real reason other than greed for it to be going up that high, like a little bit, sure, but not that high. And there's actually been reports about how a lot of these bigger companies are seeing how much the consumer will take, like how far they can push it. So I could go into a whole rant about that, but I won't. But it's affecting everything down the line because if people are charging more for things like raw ingredients or for gas or whatever, it's just driving everything up. So anyway, the whole point of that was to say that people who already did not have a lot of extra income to spend on things like decks in order to make videos now probably have even less spending money. And I think some people are feeling that, right? And it can be hard when you see other people getting decks for free or buying lots of decks and you're like, I don't know how to get eyes on my particular channel because I don't have an unboxing video every week. Now, I don't think you have to have an unboxing video all the time to get eyes on your stuff. I think, if you can't afford a lot of brand new decks, then, you might have to branch out and talk about other things. And I think it's good to have variety. I mean, I like unboxing videos, but I don't want to just watch unboxing videos. I like seeing lots of different content. I like people talking about the different spreads they use. I like people just talking about tarot, talking about, the collection I already have or what decks they're deciding to sell or whatever. I just like people talking about decks, I guess, whatever. But I know everyone's different, right? But yeah, I can see how it can be discouraging. And, this isn't just a thing that's affecting the tarot and the witchy community because I see it in the goth community and I see it in the metal community as well. So in the goth community, if you don't have you're not doing outfits of the day and unboxing the latest Killstar, haul and punk rave and, these, beautiful makeup palettes, it can be hard to make content because as much as goths say goth is a music-based subculture, I'm going to say something controversial. goth was a music-based subculture. When it started, in like the late 70s, early 80s, and into the 80s, it was about the music and it was very DIY. It is not that way anymore. If you go onto YouTube and you watch goth channel videos, it is rarely about the music. It is almost always about the fashion. It is very much an aesthetic-based subculture, as much as they like to deny it. And that costs money. It costs money to dress like that. And with the metal community, metal is very much a music-based subculture. I mean, there is an aesthetic to it, and you can get away in metal with not having a lot of money because you can get away with like a t-shirt and jeans. But you can spend a lot of money on, like leather and all this stuff. But you need money to like go to shows. Like we had Megadeth come to town a week or two ago. I couldn't afford to go. Like I just couldn't afford to buy the concert tickets. Concerts are so expensive. And first of all, I was like, you know what, it's okay. I've seen them, I think, like 4 times. So I've seen them in their heyday. It's fine. But it's disappointing. Like it's hard to not be able to participate. And I think that there is like the fear of missing out, when we can't be part of these things where, where we can participate in tags like only 10 indie decks or have unboxing videos all the time. It can make people feel like they're missing out in the community. It can also make people feel like bad about themselves because they're like, I don't have as much as the other person. And I think part of the problem is, at least in North America, and I think maybe more so in the United States. I don't want to speak for it because I don't live in the States, I live in Canada, but correct me if I'm wrong, my American friends. But there is a prevailing notion, I think, especially in North America, that, money not just equals power, but money also equals worth. And that goes back to the idea of the Protestant work ethic. There is sort of this myth that the harder you work, the more money you will make. And it doesn't always work like that. Like the CEO of a company does not work 300 times as hard as the janitor. We know this, but yet the CEO is paid 300 times what the janitor earns. But there's been this myth of like, if you don't have money, that means that you're lazy or something is wrong with you. And it used to be that poverty or income inequality was just seen as an economic condition. But unfortunately, it's been tied up more and more with value and worth and become a moral issue. So, and this has not been helped in the last 100 years or so with things like in some of the more extreme evangelical movements, there's this idea of the prosperity gospel, where if you're in God's favor, God will bless you with, money and health, and things will go well for you. If you are sick or if you don't have money, it's because you're doing something wrong. So that is one of the ideas that is gaining more and more traction in certain communities. And you see a variation of that as well in sort of the New Age community, which grew out of New Thought from the earliest 20th century, which has some of the same ideals. And it argues that if you, how you think is what you will get. Now, positive thinking to a certain extent does work and it does help, but it is not everything. And it doesn't erase other factors going on in someone's life. So overall, I think it's good to generally have a positive mindset. But if you take it to the extreme of like, if something bad happened, I must have thought something bad, I must have done something bad, then what happens is you end up blaming people when they're in a, in a difficult condition or they're sick or they don't have money. It's like, well, they must have just thought bad thoughts. So they didn't get it. They didn't get I don't have as much money as me. They just need to like be more positive. And that's as dismissive, I think, as the prosperity gospel. And they're really rooted in kind of the same thing from the earliest 20th century. But anyway, that's a long story. But basically, it's led to this thing where we have kind of equated money with worth. And I think some people have internalized that myth. And so it makes people not just feel like they're missing out, but also like maybe there's something wrong if they don't have as much money as others. And so I want to tell you that if you don't have a ton of money to go out there and buy the decks and the books and go to the concerts and buy the fancy outfits, you are just as worthy as somebody who can buy those things. And if you are somebody that, can afford those things and does, that's great. Enjoy them. Please do. I don't begrudge you that. Please enjoy your decks and your outfits. Like, it's great. But I think that we have to stop equating economics, like, and the amount of money we have in the bank with, how much we're worth as human beings. The other thing to keep in mind is one thing that I learned in sociology and has just been reinforced with various things in my life is that a lot of people that appear to have money, they don't have money. What they have is debt. There's a lot of people who will go out of their way to appear like they have money, but they don't actually have money. I remember hearing from somebody who worked for a luxury car dealership who said that 90% of the people who come in and buy a car or rent a car, they do not have the money for it. They get it on credit, and a few months later, the dealership ends up taking it back. So a lot of people who want to appear like they have money don't actually have it. And I think that's something important to keep in mind when you see somebody with a lot of stuff in any community. It only shows you a small picture. You do not know what their financial status actually is. And there are a lot of people walking around who aren't living within their means. Now, I don't know anybody in this community who's doing that, so I'm not trying to say anybody is doing that, but I just think generally in society, that is something to keep in mind, that, appearances can be deceptive. It's not always, what exactly it appears to be. So just something to keep in mind. Then we have people talking about the cost of indie decks. And because indie decks are much more expensive than mass market decks, I generally, I don't go on Kickstarter. I don't go looking around for them because I know I probably won't be able to afford it, quite frankly. But I think that, from a consumer perspective, I can see why people are like, this is so expensive. I don't know if I can justify this purchase, especially, like I said, with the economy being what it is and inflation. I'm not going to spend my grocery money on a deck of cards. Cards, as much as I love tarot cards, they are not a necessity. They are a luxury item. And I want to tell you that if you do not have a large collection, that's totally okay. You really only need one deck. Yes, I have a collection, but I have accumulated this over time. And, if you have the money to spend on a collection and you want to, that's okay too. It's your money. It's up to you to do what you want to do with it. But I just, if you're somebody who's like, oh, I don't want to miss out, and you end up spending money on that rather than the groceries, please don't do that, because you deserve to eat, and, the decks will be there later. And if you have done it in the past, it's okay too, because sometimes we all end up feeling like we're missing out, right? Know that if you have spent money and done that in the past, that, forgive yourself for that. I think we all sometimes do that. I think sometimes in the past when I haven't had money, and I've gone through times in my life where I've just been able to pay my rent and eat. It's hard seeing other people have things, and then you're like, I want it too, and you feel left out. And part of you is rebellious, I'm just gonna buy it anyway. So I know what that feels like. So be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. From a creator's end of things, because for those of you that follow me, you know that I work in the arts. People don't value artists. They don't. They would never ask an accountant to work for free, but people all the time say, oh, well, it'll be good for exposure. But you would never say that to a lawyer or an accountant, would you? No. And people really devalue artists' work. And, these days consumers are asking for more and more from tarot creators. People want to have the beautiful cardstock, and they want it to be environmentally friendly, or they want gilding, or, they want a fancy book with a box, or they want all these things. And every time you have one of those things, it adds to the cost of making it. Never mind making 78 individual pieces of art. Now, especially if you are doing handmade art, that is a lot of time. So I once did a series of 50 paintings, small paintings, for a show. It took me 3 years to make those paintings. So when you're asking somebody to hand make 78 individual pieces of art, that is a lot of time and a lot of work, and people deserve to be compensated for that. I can't talk about digital art because I'm not a digital artist. I don't know about the effort that goes into that, but I can speak from like a painter drawer perspective that it is a lot of time and a lot of work. And so what happens too is when you are making an indie deck is a big publishing house can afford to, like the more print, like the bigger the print run, the smaller the individual cost for each deck is. So they will print like hundreds, thousands of decks, and that's why they can charge less for it. And they have wide distribution. If you're an indie creator, you're probably only going to do a run of about 100, maybe 500 if you're super confident. And so the individual cost of each unit is going to be higher. And that's why people do Kickstarters and things, because it's really expensive to print that. And then you don't even know if you're going to sell them all. They might end up just sitting in your garage, right? So that's why the cost is so much higher. And you have to make a profit to be able to justify all the time you spent making those cards in the first place. So I do not begrudge artists for charging what they do. And I think a lot of times people actually undercharge and devalue their work. So I don't begrudge people charging what they charge for the decks because I know a lot goes into it. And I don't like, I feel like, I don't, if I can't afford a deck, I guess I just say to myself, well, I can't afford it. And I just kind of move on. I know some people are like, I really, really want that deck. And, there's a whole discussion too about, what do they call them? Pirate decks, right? So my perspective on pirate decks is I'm not going to judge anyone else, but I would personally never buy them. And that is just because, again, from an artist perspective, I think artists deserve to be paid for their work. And I don't want to give money to a shyster, to somebody who's ripping off someone else. Now, I have accidentally bought a fake deck, and I think it's probably happened to a lot of us. I thought it was real. It was on eBay. It was not a print deck. It was a little bit, it was cheap, and that probably should have tipped me off. I actually should do a whole video where I'm going to show you what deck I bought and telltale signs so that you know what a fake deck is. As soon as the package came in the mail, like before I even opened the package, I knew it was fake because the package was too small. Anyway, it's the whole story. But anyway, if you've accidentally bought a deck, don't beat yourself up. There are, shysters out there who like fool people. But if you're going out and you're looking for those decks on purpose, I'm not going to judge you. I'm just going to say I would not personally do that because I would rather make sure that I pay the actual artist for their work. But that is just me. And that is just my thoughts on that. I wonder what your thoughts are on all of this. Like, what are your thoughts on income inequality? Is that something we don't talk about enough? What are your thoughts on indie decks? What are your thoughts on mass market decks? Speaking of mass market decks, they are getting expensive too. And again, I'm not mad because I know all the costs have gone up, and so the publishers are having to charge more. But like a Llewellyn deck, and this is a Canadian perspective. A Llewellyn deck, in the bigger box used to be about $30-something like 2 years ago. They are now $50 to $60. And so even the mass market decks, I'm taking a big pause on because I'm like, oh, that's a bit steep and a bit pricey for where I am at right now. But I know in the States, it tends to be like things tend to be a little bit cheaper. I think it depends where you are in the world, things like that. But yeah, like a lot of like even mass market decks are going up, and like everything's costing more, but our wages aren't going up. That's going to be an issue, and not just in the tarot world. That's going to create issues down the line. But yeah, like it's getting things are getting expensive out there. What are your thoughts about it? As long as the comments are respectful, you don't have to agree with me. As long as it's respectful, I'll keep it. But if you're like, being disrespectful or disrespectful to other people in the comments, I will delete it. This is my channel. I'll delete things if I think they are rude or disrespectful, but you can free to disagree. I know there's lots of different perspectives on this, so I wonder what your thoughts are about this whole thing. I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching this. And speaking of economics, check out my Patreon. If you want to check that out, I do a weekly astrology for the week, weekly tarot scopes. I also have Coven, and I do subscriptions for private monthly readings. And you can also check out my Etsy shop for readings as well. So to get the little plug in there at the end. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. And as always, peace and love and welcome.